Buenos dias, this is Scott Oliver with WeLoveCostaRica.com. Here today with some recent news items that I thought you might find interesting. Most of our VIP members don't actually speak Spanish yet, and I understand that there's some concerns about different items living here in Costa Rica, so I'm going to try and look at three different areas of news in the past 10 days or so. Lifestyle news, which is important to all of us. Economic news, which of course is also important to all of us if indeed we're investing here in Costa Rica. And of course we all love those crazy news stories, things that simply don't make sense in the world, but and they're kind of amusing. First of all, we have lots of VIP members who are scared to death of snakes, and I thought you might like this one because it looks at snakes, who this headline here, as you can see, serpientes muerden por día a dos personas en promedio. So 2 people a day get bitten by snakes. But before you start screaming, look down the bottom here where it says la mayoría, the majority, 95% survive these snake bites. Okay, so that's the first point to remember. And the second point, more important point to remember, is this one here. Los más atacados son hombres que se desempeñan en labores agrícolas. So they're talking here about how the most attacked are men who work in agriculture between the ages of 20 to 44. So I thought you might be interested in that because the odds of you getting bitten by a snake are really pretty low. But yeah, I mean, if you're working in agriculture, if you're cutting sugarcane, etc., then the odds are a little bit higher. But I thought you might find that of interest. Any of you out there that like to follow the celebrity news will be interested in seeing that Sharon is here in Costa Rica this week. I'm very disappointed she didn't contact me. I thought we did have some sort of a fatal attraction at one time in our lives, but no, she hasn't called. And she's just a little older than me too, age 57. But she's a beautiful woman. She's here celebrating 57th birthday in Costa Rica. We also had some news items out on poverty in Costa Rica. I'm obviously not particularly excited about doing stories on the poor, unfortunate population of Costa Rica, but really the population here, even the poorest of populations, are not sort of dying in the streets of hunger, which I have seen in my life living and growing up in Africa. But the reason I think this is important is that this was a study done to show the different areas of Costa Rica that have different focuses of poverty. And I look at this because I don't obviously want our members to be buying real estate in those areas, because naturally you're going to have sort of higher crime in those particular areas. But it was an interesting study and pinpointed 107 different areas, which you can see here in red, and 32% of those poorer areas are in the Central Valley region. Okay, so obviously it's important to make sure you do your homework when it comes to living anywhere in the world, but obviously you want to make sure you're not going to be living right next door to an area that would be considered one of the more poor areas of the country. We've had some pretty negative economic news out this week. And one of the things that makes me bloody angry, to be honest with you, is the salaries that we've got. And some of the salaries are really incredibly excessive. This story here is about the state banks. Remember, in Costa Rica we have private banks and state banks. Needless to say, the state banks are, the country-owned banks, supposedly owned by the people, and there to help the people do their banking, supposedly at more favorable rates, which really isn't the case because both public and state banks are very competitive when it comes to rates. But when you look at the state bank salaries, it gets to be pretty damn infuriating. Remember, in Costa Rica, this is a country where the minimum salary is about, let's say, $700 a month, which would include all the various social obligations. But here you have Banco Nacional, Banco de Costa Rica, Banco Popular, where you have the average monthly salaries. This is salario mensual, okay, which is 19 million colones for Banco Nacional. Now there's like 530 colones to the dollar, so we're looking at $38,000 a month in salary for this Banco Nacional manager, and here maybe 32,000, here maybe 30,000 plus incentives. So we're looking obviously at pretty outrageous salaries, and quite frankly, I don't know exactly what they do for the money, but I really don't believe they're worth it. And I certainly don't believe that they're worth, 50 times the average salary that the Costa Rican people are earning. So not particularly impressed with that. We've had some pretty bad economic news out in the past couple of weeks. One of the big snack companies, which is called Jack's, has talked about moving a big percentage, and I do mean 50% of their production, to other countries. And they're looking at some El Salvador as well as Nicaragua and Chile. And they're doing that because of the altos costos en Costa Rica. Ahuyentan a alimentos Jack's. They're talking about how the high costs in Costa Rica are chasing away Jack's. Now, Jack's is a company that's been around for 51 years in this country, so this is pretty big news. And the Cámara Costarricense de la Industria Alimentaria, that's the chamber of all the companies for the food industry, are talking about how the high costs of energy and excess regulation are causing serious problems for these types of companies and other types of companies. On the same topic of high costs, you've got stories, for example, here in El Financiero, which is Costa Rica's sort of version of the Financial Times, if you like. And they're talking here about the high costs of construction, the challenge, retan, the challenging the high costs of construction, where in 2005 to build a home in Costa Rica cost $400 per square meter, whereas in 2014 we're looking at around $700 a square meter. And they talk about the overall reasons for that. And the primary reason, as you can see on the second page here of this article, the primary reason is manpower. Now, although manpower here obviously is very much more reasonable than it is in the United States and on Australia, according to a study done by a group called, can't see it here now, Buildtech, Buildtech. They're talking about the number of hours, man hours, that you need to build a family home in the United States or Australia is about 9.4 hours per square meter. Whereas in Costa Rica, that's 40 to 60 hours per square meter. They talk about, the advanced technology in construction in those other countries too. But even though our labor costs are much lower, obviously, if it's taking literally 5 times longer to build 1 square meter of home, those costs are going to be higher. So that was negative news about construction. More negative news in the State of the Nation report. That's this, Estado de la Nación. Costa Rica es un país inconvenientemente caro. Costa Rica is a country inconveniently expensive. This is the Estado de la Nación, which is the State of the Nation report that comes out each year. This is obviously not particularly positive news, and on the second page of the article they talk about how we have prices like Switzerland and Norway, said the head of this particular report. Obviously we don't have the infrastructure of those countries either. I think that's a little bit exaggerating, but as they talk about down here, Costa Rica is 20% more expensive on average than the rest of the countries in Latin America. So that's not positive news, and quite frankly I don't see that changing anytime soon. Because of the high costs of doing business in Costa Rica and high regulatory expenses both in manpower and just bullshit, obviously that's chasing a number of companies away. We've had a bit of a fast food war here recently. Burger King, for example, has just fired 8% of their workforce because of high costs and basically because of very tough competition. We've also had Bagelman's, which was a chain here that has shut down, and we also had Wendy's literally shut down. So that was not particularly positive news. On the lifestyle front, there's a big shortage of anesthesiologists in the country, and there's 8,000 children that need surgery, on the waiting list, which is not good. But if you have family living here and studying, children studying here, there's certainly some very good opportunities there for anesthesiologists. And although the state system doesn't pay particularly good salaries, a lot of the Caja surgeons do make very, very good money. They talk about here in the state system there's 170 anesthesiologists, but they really need 60 more to cover the surgery, the basic surgery demand or basic surgery requirements. Okay, and finally, there's a couple of strange items. I want to look at this one first. A Nicaraguan gentleman who was, poor bastard, was imprisoned for almost a year and a half before they realized they'd made a mistake. And what a stupid bloody mistake. The Nicaraguan guy they imprisoned was 48 years old, and he was in prison supposedly for a sexual abuse charge, when in fact the man they wanted was over 70 years old. Now, the 48-year-old guy might have had a tough life, but I doubt very much that he looked over 70, so I'm happy to see that they managed to release this guy eventually. And I know wrongful imprisonment happens in all countries, but it's always good to see that justice was served in the end. And finally, one of the crazy news stories of the week, we have this husband who was condemned and convicted and going to prison for 6 months for stealing the telephone text messages of his wife, who he thought was cheating on him. Now, I think that's a little excessive. I'm all in favour of privacy. I think it's a little excessive for a couple of reasons. Number one, 6 months is a long time for stealing text messages. He was trying to get proof that his wife was cheating on him. But he's also been ordered to pay 2.5 million colones to his wife, and also to his wife's, quote, friend, unquote, which I think is safe to assume is the gentleman that was perhaps participating in extramarital relations with his wife. But I find it fascinating because this guy goes to prison for 6 months for stealing text messages, and then you look back at other stories where you've got these people here who had 2 tons of cocaine. I repeat, 2 tons of cocaine on their boat, and the judge lets them free. Now, that didn't happen recently. That was back in May of 2014, but that's one of many stories where people have been caught with huge sums, huge weights, huge tonnages, whatever the word is, in illegal drugs, and have been released because of lack of evidence or whatever else. Has been very strange. But anyway, I thought you'd enjoy those strange stories. I'll put down the links for them for the Spanish speakers out there, and hopefully you can start practicing your Spanish. And if you liked the video, please tell me you liked it. Please like it. If you'd like to see more of these types of videos, this was fun actually doing, so let me know you'd like to see more of them. And obviously we look forward to seeing you back on WeLoveCostaRica.com. This is Scott Oliver saying hasta luego. Until next time.